Okay, so I'll be starting. So thank you, James. Thank you by be here in this series with myself, Nuno. So first question I'll be asking you is to present yourself quickly, what is your role, what you are doing, what you have been doing in the last couple of years.
Yeah, no problem. So thanks for having me on. I'm James Duez. I'm CEO and co-founder of decision intelligence business Rainbird. We are all about producing AI models that you can trust. So taking this world of probability and really focusing on causality. How can we build models that can make decisions where we can understand how those decisions were made? And that's really what sets it apart from everything else. My interest has been in decision science and how knowledge is represented in software. So how we can take the human tacit knowledge that we have and encode that into models. And that's really because the first half of my career was in working in global compliance. So I've always been very interested in how we make decisions of consequence, decisions that really matter, and how we apply technology to an increasingly compliant world.
Okay, thanks. So you touch base on a couple of topics that we'll be covering today, right? But I'll basically start to ask your thoughts, your ideas about AI. The world talks about AI, the world talks about artificial intelligence, but it seems that each one of us gives us their own meaning, right? Companies, customers, all of us have its own vision, and we are humans, like like you just also mentioned, right? So we have our own opinion. So what are your thoughts about what's AI today? Because AI today, it seems that it's been changing every day. What is the definition of AI? So what are your thoughts about AI? How do you position AI today in the market?
Yeah, so I agree with you. AI was never one thing. It was always a very broad church of different technologies. And I think people forget their AI history. So I'll answer your question about what AI is today, but let me do it through the lens of how AI has changed over the last 70, 80 years. I mean, the term was invented in 1955, right? So we've been talking about artificial intelligence for many, many decades. And, whilst everybody today, when they're thinking about AI, actually assumes what we're talking about is machine learning, right? All machine learning is AI. And this includes this latest generation of generative AI. It's still based on machine learning. It's still based on building models from data. So for 25 years, AI has been about data. But if we go back in history to the 1980s and the 1990s, AI wasn't about data. AI then meant something completely different. AI back in that era was about what we called symbolic AI. It was about knowledge and rules and how do we represent human expertise in expert systems. And so AI through the ages has changed. And one of the interesting descriptors of this is what we call the AI effect. So once something works, once we actually have a technology that we think of as AI and it consistently adds value, it typically gets given a different name and it no longer gets defined as AI. So we wouldn't call a satellite navigation system, a sat-nav system AI, but before they worked and they were commonplace, when they were in the future, we thought of them as AI. So, what are we left with now then? We're left with this latest category of technology, which is at the moment largely focused on generative AI, large language models, as the latest generation of AI that's still trying to add value. And so I think it's helpful sometimes when demystifying AI for people to not think of it as one thing, but to accept it's lots of different technologies all working together. But actually, once something really works, it often loses that AI label and it reveals itself to be what it always was. It's the next generation of computerization. And I think in this current era of AI, we've obviously got a new set of challenges. And I think that's quite interesting.
Yeah. And it's really interesting, like you said, because knowing AI for the youngsters today is not the same person that knew AI terminology 10 years ago, right? And also, like you said, right, AI is becoming, I'll say, more in one side agnostic of technology, but we always want the same, the value through some computational work, right? So, but you also mentioned on your presentation some two basic words, right? Decision intelligence, right? And it's probably one of the fields today that is growing more and more. And alongside with generative AI or LLMs, like you said, right, takes us to a probably different way of thinking, right? So can you go a little bit deeper on this decision intelligence? Because AI also mentions artificial intelligence, right? So when you combine all of these, what is decision intelligence for you and what we can do with that area of expertise?
Okay, so it's a good question. And there's lots of different ways of looking at decision intelligence. I think the first thing is decision intelligence is becoming its own label. And it's helpful to think of decision intelligence as a subset of AI focused on decisioning. So all AI for the last 25 years has been about creating predictions. Even if we're using generative AI to produce some kind of answer, that's a prediction. And that is because actually data is stupid, right? We can find correlations in data, but there's no causality in data. There's no chain of reasoning that explains why any machine learning produces its output. And that means that there is a gap between the prediction that machine learning can make and the ultimate decision that we're trying to make. And that gap typically is still filled by humans, because what humans can bring is a degree of common sense and judgment. They can apply rules, regulations. And so we've had an era of AI being data centric. And I think we're now moving into a new era of AI being decision centric. So, you know, whether it's traditional machine learning, neural networks, whether it's generative AI and large language models, these are technologies looking for something to go and do, right? What's more interesting is if you actually focus on the business outcomes you're trying to achieve. What are the decisions we're making as a business? So if we're a bank, we're onboarding customers, we're lending money, we're looking for fraud. These are recurring decisions that are made in the business. If we focus on the decision outcomes we want and we work backwards, we find that actually we might need different types of technology. Yes, we might be able to use generative AI, but we may be able to use knowledge graphs to try and bring certainty or causal reasoning, or be able to represent knowledge in rules and other things. So decision intelligence, it's more than one thing, but it's definitely about focusing on outcomes rather than focusing on the technology.
Yeah. I hear you. In fact, our partnership and alliance also mentions that human digital twin, right? Exactly the same concept you just mentioned now. And it makes sense because they focus on the decisioning part and then try to move everything, all the steps into that decision. And that is also typically what the humans do today, right? From the moment they're born until they die, right? They try to get the best possible decision. So you also touch based on something interesting, data, right? And you touch base already twice in the history of AI, but also on this decision intelligence and the way we probably model the data and the way we want. So is it fair to say that today people want to use data has something supporting real decision, but they cannot look to the data in the same way they were looking before. That was very structured, organized, and you spend a lot of time structuring the data to support the decision. Is it fair to say that one of the biggest challenges today is how to bring the data world that by definition is unstructured, unpredictable, something that you cannot control, and how can you support the decision, right, based on these categorization of possibly what the world will be starting to call new data sets, new set of data. So how do you connect these unstructured, unpredictable data with the decision process, and how do you see technology combining the two worlds?
So look, I think business decision making is becoming increasingly complicated. It's very interconnected. And that's because there's more competition, there's more disruption, there's more noise, customers are more demanding. So I think businesses face bigger challenges than they've ever faced before. And to improve the quality of decisioning, it's not enough to just offer kind of data-driven insights. It's just no longer enough. We've done all the dashboards, we've done data sciences to try and produce some predictions, and of course this still has a role to play. But these are high stakes. For most businesses, decisions are really high stakes. They require precision, they require explainability, and these are paramount. And people, when they think about AI, because it's become so synonymous with machine learning, people assume that when they hear AI, but actually what they're really hearing is machine learning, that they have to start with data. You have to start with data. But people forget that most data that you're building AI models from or machine learning models from were actually the result of some process in the first place, right? If you want to analyze insurance claims data to build a prediction as to who might claim on an insurance policy, those policies were written by normally human beings as a result of some human process. And the whole world of machine learning alone, just if we constrain ourselves to only extracting knowledge from data, we lose the opportunity to build models that can leverage what our best people already know. And so this gap between data and decision, this moving from being all about the data, where's the data, to focusing on decision outcomes, is really a move towards precision and trust in a world where not only are all of the industries of magnitude becoming more regulated, financial services is becoming more regulated, healthcare is becoming more regulated, but AI is becoming more regulated itself in order to try and protect the population from predictions. And so I think people need to reframe their architecture and shake off this assumption that just because data was the right place to start for some of the big data native businesses that grew up in this era, the Google, the Metas, these organizations, they're able to build machine learning models that make very simple decisions off extremely rich data. And when you take that logic to more complicated businesses like banks and insurance companies and healthcare providers, that logic doesn't work because the data is messy and the decision is very complicated. So if the 1980s and 90s were all about human knowledge, and then we've had sort of 20 years plus of everything being about data, we now have the opportunity to fuse and combine these together for a new future where we can have the power of prediction, but we can also have the power of causal reasoning and the ability to embed human knowledge and escape everything being about data.
Now, so you mentioned something that I believe it makes a lot of sense, that is losing what the human has if we just rely on data. And in fact, part of our offering, joint offering, is on that, right? Is don't miss what you believe that people already know. Sometimes they cannot even explain. They will say it's common sense or it's my experience that tells me that, right? And in fact, majority of times they are right because the experience, many times you cannot put that into data, right? So you also mentioned more and more regulated decisions. You mentioned that critical decisions, right? So the regulated business today is more and more affected, right? So then I don't even think that there are businesses that, even if we talk about, I don't know, open finance or all of that, even if we say that, oh, banks are not controlling it, there is someone controlling it. If we talk about blockchain, oh, no one has the control. But in fact, when you go and take each step, right, someone is always controlling, right? So how do you see, right, that these regulated domains, these ideas of having entities behind the way the technology is applied, that we can, in the end, how do you see regulation in broader terms and decision intelligence, machine learning? Who owns what? Who can say that what's right, what's wrong?
Yeah, look, it's a good question, and it's quite a big area, isn't it? Because I think the bigger challenge. So it's perfectly right to say who gets to decide, right? I think that's a perfectly valid question. But I think what's happening at the moment is, without really thinking about it, without being conscious about it, humankind is ceding more and more and more decision making to machines. And those machines are, because they're largely based on pure machine learning, are opaque. They are black box. They are not. They're not able to be understood very easily, and they certainly can't explain their outcomes. So I think in order to answer the question, who gets to decide on the logic, we need to be able to have an architecture where we're able to see what's going on anyway. And so, moving away from black box towards glass box, being able to build models. And, in our partnership, we work a lot with knowledge graphs because they're inherently transparent, and we can embed human expertise in these graphs. We can reason over them. You get the opportunity to answer the question you're asking, which is who should be defining these things. But, there is an awful lot of knowledge that is already written down. It's expressed in regulation, in policy, in operating procedures. And regulation has been designed to be written in a way that is unambiguous. Okay, it's written by lawyers who write it for other lawyers to be able to interpret it. But that's quite close to being computable. If you can take a piece of regulation and turn that into a type of AI that you can chat to or ask questions about your own circumstances, particularly if you can build a layer of expertise that, all of our joint customers have lots of tribal expertise, the practice knowledge they've built up, the things that make them special in the market. Being able to build layers of these things transparently so that then you can reason over your case in light of regulation, but not in the dark. You're doing it in the light where everything can be seen. You're providing the opportunity, whether the answer you would agree with or you'll disagree with, for the first time in more than 2 decades, you're able to see the causal chain of reasoning that explains how an answer was made. So we want our AI to be precise, but we need it to be transparent so that then we can decide if it's right or wrong. And there are plenty of cases when we can use AI and it's okay that it's an estimate. But most of the people I speak to, if you say, would you like a big AI that can do everything, but it's going to keep getting things wrong? Or do you want a narrow AI that knows how to do this job and is 100% precise and can explain its reasoning? That's where the value is to businesses. It's not in the big, vague black box. It's in how we apply large language models and machine learning. How do we apply that into narrow domains so that we can build tools that do specific things? And that has to be, with the increasing regulation that's coming, that has to be a priority. We need to be able to provide the efficiencies, improvement in accuracy that we associate with AI, but we need to do it in a way that's transparent so that we can understand it and see, everybody can see exactly what's going on. And not only are customers going to start insisting on it, but regulators already are. And I think all buyers of AI need to be very focused on that trend.
So are you saying that it's probably good news for the people listening to us, right? Are you saying that we'll be able somehow to have technology helping us to understand what typically we always say, oh, that's something that the regulators put forward, right? It's a law. It's something that I personally cannot understand that, right? So these LLMs and these domains you mentioned, this narrow type of approach, right, will not bring also questions about ethics, compliance, will not probably raise some concerns because trust, explainability, the glass box, like you mentioned, That's okay, but once more, is it fair to say that we as humans will then really want to care about the explanation, or there will be a moment in time, according to your, let's say, predictions, where that's just the start of the journey? Because we don't trust today, and then later on we start trusting and we don't care anymore. So where the compliance and ethics then lie down in that future or near future, where we simply agree too much or we trust too much, right? Where is compliance and ethics in your way of thinking enters in this discussion?
Yeah. So look, I think we're right to not trust technology we don't understand. History has taught us this lesson many, many times. If we allow technology to do things without us understanding how it works, things go wrong. There's lots of examples through history of that happening. And there's lots of examples through history of regulation slowing down innovation, right? So a very good example is the humble microwave oven. Was invented in 1946, just after the Second World War, but it was only really used, became common in 1980, right? Some 35 years later. Why? Because nobody understood how it worked. Nobody trusted it. It was counterintuitive. Governments decided they wanted to regulate it. So there's a long history of this, and people can also go and look up the Therac machine, which was a cancer treatment machine that wasn't understood. That caused many deaths. So history's got lots of these different things. I think, in a way, it's helpful for people to break this down. And again, because people think of AI as one thing, I'm always encouraging people to break it down. Now, if I were to use, I'll give you an example. If I was to go to GPT-4 or Sonnet 3.5 or Gemini, not to ChatGPT, but the actual large language model that sits behind it.
Yeah.
And if I said to it, what's 1 + 1, right? It's going to give me the correct answer. But it's not doing that because it's performed a calculation. It's doing it because it's been very well exposed to the question in its training data. Okay. And again, if I say, what's 1 + 2 multiplied by 2, well, this requires a bit more understanding because you have precedence in a sum. So again, it's going to give me the right answer, but not because it's understood that there's an order to how you do calculations. Again, it's going to be well represented. If I was to ask a much more complicated maths problem, it's going to give me an approximate answer. I'm not going to get an accurate answer. And I could ask it the question 5 times and I get 5 different answers. Okay. But why would I use a large language model to do this? Why wouldn't I use a calculator? Calculators are perfectly well understood and they're capable of doing maths problems. Okay. Now, if I go to ChatGPT and I ask ChatGPT to do a complex calculation, it knows well enough that the LLM should not be making this decision, and it'll write some Python, or it'll hand the task off to something else that will do it mathematically, and it'll be accurate. Now that what it's done is it's used a calculator. It hasn't used the LLM, and so part of the toolkit that we've been very interested in building and we've been working together on is this ability to pass specific tasks to kind of semantic calculators or causal knowledge calculators that can calculate over knowledge, not using numbers, but using words, and to be able to reason over particular areas. But that requires us to be very narrow. But the trade-off, if we can build something that can explain the answer work out an answer logically and explain that logically, no regulator is worried about that, because you're bringing it out. The regulators are trying to regulate what isn't understood, what is black box, what is a prediction. There's no need to regulate rules. There isn't regulations for decision trees. There isn't regulations for any form of causal reasoning. So, I think we're entering a world where large language models are very good at understanding the question we're asking. But actually, we need to use different types of technology, one of which is a calculator when we want to do maths. But there are other types of technology we can use to reason over knowledge. And I think that's going to change the way that regulators are looking at governing AI, from being, again, about AI generally, to thinking about the types of AI and are you using the right types of AI for the right task. When approximation is okay, it's fine. When precision is critical and explainability is critical, generative AI is not fine on its own.
Yeah, so probably calculator, like we call it today, it was one previous form of AI because no one was really able to do that, right? So
That's
in the
correct.
moment we start testing it, right, the calculator now has a name, right? Has a name, right?
Exactly.
And what you said is really interesting because now I'm probably facing a challenge of my children telling me, Father, I was doing my exam. My teacher said I was wrong, but I know I was right. So how will I stay on that, right? Because in the end, you are starting a new type of world where even teachers, right? We are losing teachers every day in the world,
Yes.
right? What is a teacher? In fact, is someone that should have a personality, should be there with a purpose to help someone to reason about something, not to ask you to memorize that 1 + 1 and the number one and the plus sign means something. You need to understand why that means something, or else you lose the bare definition of mathematics, right? So we moving to that journey, we are also entering, or probably looking to a space where automation takes a very specific role, because I do believe that humans want to have an easier life, a relaxed life, and they look to, again, that AI, that in fact is a combination of multiple technologies possible, multiple decisions, all of that. But we look to have less work, more value. Do you believe that automation will it be possible to have many decisions fully automated in a world we will be able to trust on the decisions? Do you see that today some fear of regulators to fully trust technology? So where do you see automation and AI coming into play? And if you believe that there will be a moment where we will really be trusting automation to take decisions on our behalf?
So I think it depends on the complexity and the importance of the decision. So my view is, I don't think it should be people's aspirations or focus to completely automate the kinds of decisions that people are making today. These business decisions of consequence. I think decision intelligence is about augmenting that decision, enabling people to do what they do best, which is, things like speaking to customers, building rapport. So I think, whereas a lot of the time people are thinking, well, maybe the pinnacle, maybe the peak of this entire direction of travel is entirely autonomous automation, I don't subscribe to that. I think it's unnecessary. I think there is such huge value to be gained without needing to lose control. So a nice analogy here is if you think about you're driving an autonomous vehicle, you can maybe have to take your hands off the steering wheel of a Tesla or whatever, but you wouldn't take your eyes off the road. And I think that's really where we are at the moment. If we think about the automation journey, where we're able to take our hands off, but we won't take our eyes off. And we were a very long way away from taking our mind off. I didn't even to be able to say, I don't have to think about this thing at all, right?
Take me there and I'll go.
that feels a very, 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 very long way off. But people who use this as an analogy. I think what's interesting, and this thought just comes to mind, we have a case study that was written by analysts. It wasn't written by us, and about a customer where we managed to save about 5 hours of time, very senior people's time, in a decision process that was almost eliminated. It became 5 seconds, very, very quick. And one of the things that this organization was very focused on is, well, what does that mean? What's the impact of that kind of efficiency gain? And actually, that customer almost doubled the size of their business within 3 months of this change, because those very senior people now had time to do things they hadn't had time to do for more than 10 years, which is they could put their cell phone number on the reports that the system would generate, their email address, they had time to speak to customers. And customers reported that that company that was providing that service was giving a more human service by their adoption of AI, not a less human service. So I think the need to entirely automate, I think is not there. It's there in some very simple tasks, but when we're thinking about complex decision making, what we want to do is make everybody a ninja who can be hugely efficient, hugely accurate, and free up the time for people to grow their businesses. And actually, a lot of the customers we work with, they want to grow market share, they want to be able to grow their business, but they want to be able, they've invested a lot in their people. They want their people to be able to have the time back to be able to grow relationships, grow their book of business with customers. So I think autonomy is a red herring, actually. I think it's perfectly reasonable for the pinnacle of decision intelligence to be human and machine working together in a complementary way, not trying to replace human, except in some very narrow tasks.
Okay, good. Again, we are almost approaching the end. So let me throw you two very basic challenges. What will be the key message you'll say to possible customers, people that want to adopt decision intelligence, right? We talked before about AI. I'll not say AI, I'll say let's focus on decision intelligence, right? What will be your key messages of what they should take out of this conversation? And at the same time, I'll say a message to humans, right? Message to humans. So what will you say to each one of us around this world of decision intelligence?
Yeah, so look, I think lots of people are spending lots of time and money working with generative AI, but they're struggling with hallucinations, lack of accuracy, and lack of transparency. So the biggest challenge with AI today is precision and explainability. And we solve the problem with generative AI, those problems, in high stakes applications. So I think any business that cares about precision and cares about trust in this increasingly regulated world should definitely be talking to us about, regardless of all these different prompting strategies and architectures and all these ways people are trying to ground them, there is a very powerful way of being able to, use large language models to process language, but not use them as a proxy for reasoning, and use comparative technologies. And that's the problem that we solve within the market. I think for humans, I think for us generally as people, we're all consumers, we're all workers, we've all got children that are growing up in this world which is quite different from the one we grew up with, right? Thinking, well, what's our world going to be like in terms of technology? They're going to be doing jobs that have not been invented yet, using technology that's not been invented yet. That's quite a scary future. I'm very positive about AI and its direction of travel. I think, everybody should educate themselves. Everybody can play with ChatGPT. Everybody can see what it does well. They can recognize what it doesn't do well. They can see the direction of travel. Nothing's going to take away from human creativity. Nothing is going to take away from the importance of people in work. And in the same way that, when Google was invented, right, we all started using this thing called search. And that's made our lives abundantly more efficient. We're going to continue to have tools that are going to be developed to make our work life better, to be able to create new value, to be able to create new things, and democratize services, democratize knowledge, build tools that can help people with healthcare and managing their finances that the world would never have had and desperately needs. I think it's a very exciting future to be part of. But AI isn't a category of work. It's something that everybody will be using in every job. And there's a great economist who said, don't be afraid of AI. AI will not steal your job. Somebody who learns how to use it better than you, they may steal your job. So get educated, ask questions, learn, experiment, play. Don't be fearful. None of that science fiction stuff's going to happen. It's irrelevant. and in doing so, equip yourself to be better placed for what's coming. But I think it's an exciting future. But precision and explainability are increasingly going to be paramount. I think that's going to define the next 5-10 years.
Okay, so let me finish you on a simple question. And what if I was not a human and I was a human digital twin, right? You already said to humans, that's my message, to possible customers, my message. What will be asking to machine? Probably in the future, when the machine sees this video cast, right? They will be able to analyze it and to interpret. What you'll say to them?
Oh, that's good. What would I say to the machine?
Yes. So what do you ask? What do you want from them, right? Where they should focus? What they are really asking, right?
Yeah. Look, I think I want the machines of the future to be able to explain themselves and be accountable for what they do, because at the moment, it's acceptable. It's acceptable for human beings to cause damage, right? We crash into each other in cars. We make mistakes all the time, and there's a degree of social acceptability. There is no social acceptability when machines cause deaths or injury,
True.
right?
True.
And that's quite right. There shouldn't be. So I want AI of the future to take seriously its responsibility to be accountable for what it does, and that means it needs to be able to justify what it's done, not as a guess, but logically. I want the AI of the future to be logical.
Okay, so you want AI to be better than humans because some of us are not really logical in decisions we are taking, right? Yeah. So again, thank you, James. Right, it was really nice pleasure to have you here, right? And we'll speak soon. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.